My name is Karen O'Donoghue, and I'm the founder of the Happy Tummy Company. We founded the Happy Tummy Company in 2014 in Hackney, East London, because at the time you couldn't get a bread in the UK that resolved IBS issues, or issues of any kind to do with any form of inflammation. And so the Happy Tummy Company came about as a food solution to a health problem. At the time, 33% of Britain was either constipated or suffering with some sort of digestive health disorder. And so there was the market. And the market grew from there over the years to people interested in health, well-being, mental health. And now, I guess, what are we, 2022? And now we're in Ireland and we're on the West Coast in Mayo. We deliver our bread all over Ireland on a subscription basis and one-off and into the UK. We only bake bread to order because we are very pro-sustainability and anti-waste. And I really hate guessing. And also, just in terms of cash flow, being a subscription model lends itself to not having to take on investment early days in your journey, and that was really important to me. I have incredible bakers here with me at the moment, Beth O'Brien and Ciara Sweeney. And both of them are Ballymaloe trained and are fucking awesome. And those guys and an awesome crew of New Zealand bakers have been working over at the bakery since Monday, baking you guys 100% whole grain digestible things. So hopefully some of you guys have had opportunities to taste those. And if not, check out thehappytummyco.com and we can deliver you bread if you are residing in the UK or Ireland. Without further ado, I'm just going to get everyone on the panel to introduce themselves and then we'll kick off the chat in a meaningful way. Just go for it.
Hi, I'm Wingmon. I am head baker at Landrace Bakery in Bath. It's, I guess, what would be classed as a high street bakery. I've been baking for about 9 years, mostly sourdough all of my career, and at the moment at Landrace we are working towards getting a mill which will allow us to mill more local grains and work with farmers across the southwest. So that's something that I feel like is something I've been working towards my whole career and something I'm really excited about.
Hello, my name is Henrietta Inman. I am the founder of Wakelands Bakery at Wakelands Organic Agroforestry Farm in Suffolk. I've been cooking really my whole life, and for me it's always been about bringing joy to people through the connection through food. I worked as a pastry chef and chef in London about 11 years, then moved back to Suffolk 2 years ago to start the bakery on the farm, which has been running for about a year now. So our sort of core mission in the bakery is really to cook and bake with what's around us and to bring that to the people who visit the farm and to our local community, and for them to eat that food in situ, I think is really, really meaningful and powerful. So with our grains, we use the YQ and PQ population wheats grown on the farm. Have you all heard of them, the YQ? Quite a lot of you. So they're very they're genetically diverse wheats, basically, that because of their diversity, they are therefore very resilient without the need for any inputs. So through our bread, hopefully, we're spreading that word. And then recently, we've been growing lots of other grains on the farm, such as red lammas and heritage wheat that would have been grown in Suffolk a long time ago. Other populations that have been inspired by the YQ and Q populations and various other grains. And we did, about 2 months ago, did a diversity bread club using all of these grains that have been grown on the farm over the past year or so. And every week we would give subscribers to the bread club a letter talking about the grain, talking about the farmer, talking about their farms and how they're working, just to, again, tell the story of those grains and the work that the farmers are doing and why they're so important, why this diversity of grains is important in our soils and our guts. Then, because of the sort of size of the farm, Wakelands is 56 acres, and a lot of it is obviously forestry. So Wakelands supplies about 50% of our grain, and the rest is from John and Guy Turner, who have an organic farm in Grantham, just outside of Nottingham. And then that grain goes down to Hodmedods, the pulse and grain pioneers, who I'm sure you're all aware of. If not, look them up. And they have this amazing, beautiful mill called a New American Stone Mill. So John and Guy's grain is milled there, and then it comes to us every week fresh and full of nutrition and flavour. And I think it's sort of important to point out that when they ran out of last year's harvest of the YQ, because the YQ is grown on lots of farms all over the UK now, we then started to use their Edgar wheat, which is a modern German e-wheat, which grows really well in organic systems, and that might run out soon, a bit before harvest, so we'll probably use some of his John's oak farm population. And we didn't say to John when he ran out of the YQ, oh, we don't want anything else, we just want YQ and we'll get it from another farm. We said, that's fine, we'll use your Edgar. He needs to empty out his silos before this year's harvest, and we're really happy to take it and sort of adapt our formulas and things to what John has and help him get his grain to market, basically. And that's really, really fun and creative for us in our bakery and keeps our imaginations alive, which I think is really, really important as cooks and bakers. Sometimes it can get quite mechanical when you're in a lot of kitchens using quite generic ingredients. We also do a subscription like Karen, and then most of our business is wholesale, so we sell about 15 local shops. And our customers are really, really invested in what we're doing and like to hear about what we're doing, and we often get them to come to the farm and see the grains growing, which again is quite powerful. And we're going to do one more sort of walk in the wheat just before harvest for all our wholesale customers to see the wheat growing that will make their bread next year. And then the final thing I think is... Sorry, I feel like I'm going on and on. But so our other sort of main point is that we're a 100% whole grain bakery. And I think that sort of ties the things I've said together in terms of using the whole grain and that sort of having the whole story of the grain. I think what we're doing is really about like creating local links and recreating a local food culture, and so much of the sort of grain's flavour is in the bran and the germ that is sifted out in the production of white wheat. So we want to keep all of that in and keep the flavour of the soil and the farmer and everything in those grains. It's also about nutrition. The bran and the germ contain 80% of the grain's nutrition, and I think we really see our role as really nourishing our community, and if we sieve that away, it's not good. We're not giving our customers and local people the best food that they could be getting. And then finally, it's about flavour. I think that's the key element. I think if we're going to change people's hearts and minds, we've got to move them, and food can really move people and get them thinking. So if it doesn't taste good, we're not going to get anywhere really. So we're really for the whole grain and the whole story and the integrity and honouring the work that our farmers are doing. So that's really good for us.
Thanks. I think we'll come back to the business model, because I think that's an interesting one to discuss here today. And I think we'll also come back to that creativity element in a bakery, to be able to adjust to what's available to you, because what's available to us as this industry grows is dwindling. And so we're here today to encourage people to farm these types of grains so that the industry can grow. And that is really the most important thing to come out of this whole festival. Safia, can you tell people about yourself?
Hi, I'm Safia. I was a baker in another life, trained as a pastry chef, spent some time in bakeries, and then moved on to the more creative side of food. So for the last 5 years, I've been a food photographer. And a couple of months ago, I launched a platform called Another Pantry, which is kind of aiming to take all of the conversations that we've been having at Groundswell and the conversations that we're having here, and filter it through to the home cook and the home baker, and try and reduce that disconnect that I've found through working in the food industry for so long, that if you're aware of these issues, if you're aware of issues like seasonality and provenance, the importance of eating whole grains, it's easy to have those conversations, but if you're not involved in the food world and you're just a consumer or a customer, those topics can be quite heavy. So Another Pantry is an attempt to make that more accessible, get restaurant goers, home bakers, home cooks thinking about where their food's coming from, is kind of based around the idea that we have 3 opportunities a day to get people thinking about their food. And as a country, I think we spend 60% we have 60% of our meals at home still. We do eat out a lot, but we eat at home. And I think it's really important that the consumer and the home cook is aware of everything that's going on at industry level and amongst restaurants and food producers in order to affect change at a wider level. So, we do that through... It's primarily, the platform is a recipe platform, so it's trying to kind of invert the traditional recipe website. We only release recipes once every season, so 4 times a year, trying to kind of slow down food content. I think, especially with my food photography background, I got quite frustrated with being ambushed with food content, I guess, and, those kinds of newsletters that you get that say, here's 70 recipes to cook this weekend, and you're like, I'm not going to cook 70 recipes this weekend, it's not going to happen. So it's trying to kind of encourage a sense of mindfulness, not only of what's on our plates, but also what's on our screens. And I think, I think bread, especially with relation to this topic, is a really good lens into understanding all of the different kind of parts of the food system and where we as consumers belong in that. So, yeah.
That's an awesome point around just the bombardment of knowledge and information, which we will do to you here today. I think to Safia's point about just the wider community. So when I was thinking about the wider community and how can we instill more knowledge around grain, does anyone know how much grain is in a 330ml bottle of beer? Anyone? So there's 130 grams of grain in one bottle of beer. And I guess in a loaf of bread, we're using 500 grams, somewhere around that. And let's say a loaf of bread costs £5 and a bottle of beer costs £5. And so I guess I often hypothesize that it's much more fruitful for farmers to farm barley and malts and things like that for the beer industry because they're going to get more bang for their buck. And so really, you should walk away from here and just grow for beer making. But what we're trying to do at the Happy Tummy Co. is we're trying to get people to pay per gram. And so our signature loaf costs €25. And our profit margin on that is pretty bad, would you believe? But what it does is it gives you a great bowel movement in the morning. If mental health is your struggle, it will help with that eventually. If you are aging and you want lifelong health, it's going to help with that. I can make all the promises in the world, and the marketing agency in Ireland will try to sue me. But there we go. That's the fight that we're fighting. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that for farmers to get into this way of farming and for us to continue to have access to heritage grain, we need to raise the value around food, and we need to encourage people to spend more money on their grain. Okay, so who has eaten at the bakery this week? Amazing. Who hasn't eaten at the bakery this week? Did you eat white bread? No white bread. This gentleman ate some white bread. So, in eating white bread, what happens there is the bran is taken off and the bran is given to the pharmaceutical industry so that they can make vitamin E supplements. And the reason people are deficient in vitamin E is because they're not eating whole grains. And so there's another fact. I won't throw too many more at you. I will leave it for the moment. I want to ask Wingman about more about the mill. So at the Happy Tummy Co, we also considered milling our own grain, but then we spoke with our millers and they were like, it's really fucking hard. And so we were like, you know what, we've got lots of battles to fight at the moment, and so we're going to leave the milling off for a while. And so I'm really intrigued as to your decision to start milling your own grain and why that's a big decision for you.
So, as I explained, so just to make this clear, I'm not the owner of the bakery that I work for, but the owner of the bakery, Andrew, is currently in the States at the moment on a big research trip in anticipation of us getting the mills, a new American stone mills from America. And the reason why we have decided to move towards having a mill is we're in a lucky position where we're actually co-owned by Westcombe Dairy, who have a lot of arable land already, and they have been growing grain for us. And in the wider picture, we actually do use white flour. We're not an exclusively whole grain bakery. In the wider picture, we are having difficulties with supply of grain. And so milling seems like the best choice for us. And I feel like that's the reality for a lot of bakeries in the UK at the moment. There's definitely been a big movement towards people by acquiring their own mills or pooling together, like Kim and Emily in Nottingham, the Nottingham Mill Co-op. So I think that's a big movement. But aside from that, for me personally, I don't necessarily think that every bakery acquiring a mill is the answer, because as you say, like, you know, you spoke to your millers and they said it was really fucking hard. And that is the truth. It's a very different skill to baking. Just because you enjoy being a baker, it doesn't mean that you have the skill or the will to be a miller. And so I don't necessarily think that's the answer. And also, economically, not every bakery can afford to buy a mill. We are in a very lucky position where we're co-owned by another business, which is enabling us to purchase a mill. But yes, the lack of resources for us, like, we want to work with more local farmers, but we don't have a local miller who we can really work with. That's the main issue for us, and so that's what's pushed Andrew to this decision.
Awesome. Henrietta, can you talk more to, you know, your decision to moving back to Suffolk and wanting to kind of bake on the land, and I guess the relationship, if you could develop the relationship you have with the farmer and how that really is important to you, and I suppose keeps you going and keeps you stimulated and inspired.
Yeah, definitely. So worked in London for about 11 years in kitchens, which was great, and I learnt my sort of trade there and really enjoyed it and loved it. But there was this ever lingering idea of burnout, which happened. So I got very burnt out, tired, and I think maybe I didn't know it then, but I perhaps looking back on it now feel like I was probably not getting that much fulfillment from my work. And then, like, cooking wonderful food, and in the last 2 restaurants I worked with, I had very good relationships with the producers we were working. Not everything that we were using, I think most things were pretty traceably sourced, but perhaps not everything. In the bakery now, we know where every ingredient is coming from, except for our organic cane sugar. Sugar is another discussion. But this idea of the bakery at Wakelands had been in discussion for a number of years when Martin Wolf and Anne Wolf, who began the agroforestry system there when they were still alive. And then when Martin died, he asked for before he died, he asked for a symposium to be held and to talk about the sort of future of the farm with lots of the Wolf family, and friends of the farm. And the bakery was, again, one of the topics that came up, and it had also been discussed with Martin's very close friend, Kimberly Bell, from Small Food Bakery in Nottingham, who was the first baker to use the YQ population wheat. So I was using the YQ at a restaurant I was working in London, and then one of the co-founders of Hodmidos, Josiah Moultram, told me to visit the farm and see the YQ growing and see the agroforestry, and I just went. And
does everyone here know what YQ stands for?
Sorry, stands for yield and quality.
And so I guess just so that we're all on the same page. So pre-World War, we were farming for quality over quantity. During the war, the farming system of grain changed for yield at any cost. And so that's how kind of YQ came to be, to kind of highlight that point and highlight how to modernise a modern system, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And basically sort of 20 modern grains were crossed every which way to create 190 sort of children plants. So in the field, there's all of those plants, and if one of them fails due to the weather or a pathogen, the rest will thrive. And lots of bakers have sort of taken that message of resilience in diversity, and it's really inspired them and their work. It's quite a sort of poetic idea, and a beautiful idea as well. So then I discussed the idea of the bakery with the farm owners, and we got it going and things. And I think in the bakery, our role is to use all of the crops from the agroforestry system, but also we are in charge of harvesting all the fruit from the trees. So there's cherries, apples, pears, quince, loads and loads and loads. And the cherries are just arriving, and it's all slightly daunting, but we'll get there. And then we sort of integrate the crop alley ingredients and the tree alley ingredients, mostly for farm events, but also for off-farm things as well. And I think just over the past year or so, although it's been really busy, it's been really exciting and very, very nourishing to work with the produce from the farm immediately.
Yeah.
And
do you, Henrietta, do you feel that your working relationship with the farmer that you work with, it's very fluid?
Yeah.
So,
well, actually, so
are you dictating essentially what he is growing, how much of every variety he's growing, or is it still very much in like a test period in which you're testing the business model?
No, so Wakeland started as a research farm, so the YQ&Q were developed there with the Organic Research Centre and the John Innes Centre. And now it's in this new phase with Martin and Anne's sons, Toby and David, and they are basically diversifying the farm and adding value on farm with businesses like our bakery, a woodland haberdasher who uses the materials from the farm to make sort of wonderful wooden spoons and things, and veg CSA. So in terms of the grain, the YQ&Q are just still being grown there, but just because that's that. And then, but since we've started, and thanks to relationships with other farmers and plant researchers, not last year, but the year before, at winter we sowed this sort of, I named it the Alley of Wonder, which was a mixed alley of 6 different grains. So there was red lammas, cornovi, which is a mixture being developed by a farmer called Fred Price in Somerset. What else did we have? A purple wheat, another thing that a plants researcher is working on. So basically this alley was an opportunity for us to get more diversity into the soil and more diversity into our bread, and like I was saying, sort of spread the word about the importance of diversity. So I have a conversation with David Wolf, the farm owner, sort of every year about grains that we'd like to try out and things, and we're also growing. So again, inspired by the YQ Fred Price and a farmer in Scotland called Colin Gordon. They're working on a sort of another population, but instead of being created from modern wheats, they're focusing on heritage wheats, obviously for their more diversity and because they're long root systems and everything like that. So we've got an alley of Fred's heritage wheat plots. There's also a rye population growing. And then that will be, so then Maisie, my colleague, and I, we will then, after harvest, we will bake with Fred's heritage, his 20 different heritage grains.
Amazing.
And we will feed back to him how they worked for him to then carry on developing his population.
Safia, it might be interesting for you to jump in here, because obviously we've got Henrietta, who is just in this incredible ecosystem growing these incredible grains, and it's kind of otherworldly really to most people. And you're trying to get to the wider audience of people who, I mean, wouldn't be able to maybe even comprehend or anything that Henrietta is saying. So how do we, what do you think the timeline is there? So in terms of demand for heritage grains, and then, I mean, the point being that we want everyone eating well, so we have better, thriving communities. And so where do you see your role in getting people even a third of the way there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a long game.
Yeah.
I think I've thought about this a lot, and really for people who maybe have never interacted with this world, you're kind of asking for a lifestyle change for people to kind of start thinking about this stuff. We're so used to just, constant availability of everything in the supermarket, and supermarkets telling us that we have a lot of choice, but actually we don't have much choice especially when it comes to something like bread. So I also think it's a question of messaging. I think a lot of stuff gets lost along the way. I've had a few conversations with people here about, firstly, for example, the issue of elitism in a way around these kinds of issues and topics. I don't know if anyone else has had this, but as someone who cares quite deeply about the food that I eat and where it's coming from, a lot of people, friends and family, look at it as kind of snobbery, right, and think, so you're going to walk that extra 20 minutes to go to that bakery to choose that bread rather than go to somewhere that's 10 minutes down the road that's £4 cheaper or something like that. I think it's about breaking down that problem and also addressing the issue of value and the fact that, you know, you can go into the supermarket, you can get a loaf of bread for 70p, but actually, really, you're deferring the cost. It actually costs, I think, 3 times as much in terms of cost to the NHS, cost to the environment. And people don't realise that. So I think if we're able to kind of get those messages across and connect with people, ultimately, bread is something that's so incredibly universal. It's such an amazing tool for us to be able to use to get these messages across to people. So I think, especially in places like the high street bakery and retail, even in restaurants, you know, I did some consulting for a restaurant in South London that said they upped their price of bread on the menu from £3.50 to £4.50, and there was outrage from the customers, so they put it back down. And I was like, no, that's an opportunity for you to communicate and to talk and explain why that price has gone up. We go to these restaurants and we love this sense of this restaurant culture and hospitality and food, but really we're not connecting with the people that are creating it or questioning why it's so good. If, you know, the places that we go to, I just think there's so many access points.
Absolutely, and there's an opportunity cost to everything.
Yeah.
I think your point around bread being a universal thing and a universal culture around that, for me, I think if everyone can change the bread that they eat from whatever percentage of white to 100% whole grain, the impact you will have on your locality, community mental health and everything will completely change. You'll be less reliant on over-the-counter medicine. You won't need to take a vitamin E supplement. And I think the likelihood of people local to you investing in milling is going to increase. And when that increases, you'll be eating better bread. And the bread will actually bloom more because it's freshly milled as opposed to sitting on a supermarket shelf for a year and a half. And so for me, it's really important that we get the opportunity to have more of these discussions. It's so important to me that we have the likes of Safia sitting beside Henrietta. I think that's a perfect example of 2 people so driven and passionate about the part they can play. And then Wingmon, she is so passionate at the moment about like her bakery increasing the whole grain bread that they sell over the white stuff. And us, like at the Happy Tummy Co., we are so driven by whole grain. And as a team, you know, we all come from different backgrounds. You know, some of us have baked with white flour before, but as much as we increase the fibre content and we get flaxseed into the porridges and we put that through brioche doughs and, you know, we play around with seeds and soaking, all of us are in agreement. All of us are in agreement around the taste being 100 times better and how we feel being 100 times better. And so I think, you know, we all probably have like little examples of when change happens and the effects that has. Like I was out in Galway one night with Beth and her brother, and I got a bit drunk and I started talking to people about whole grains, a bunch of surgeons, in fact. And I was really laying into them about their appetite for white flour. Beth was like hiding in the corner being like, oh my God. And then recently, Beth found herself at a festival and she was like, I'm that person who's giving out to people about the white buns that they're eating. And so I think, like Safia nailed it, like there's a peer pressure and there's kind of like you're the uncool kid if you're walking that extra 20 minutes. And I guess what we're trying to do here is make food cool, make whole food cool, make eating the skin on a vegetable cool because you've got a natural laxative in your diet now and you can poo after dinner. So that's what we're about at the Happy Tummy Co, if I haven't made that obvious enough already. Just because I'd like to add a little bit of energy to the room because it's the afternoon and it's been hot and I'm very tired. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to jump in with at this point? Yes.
I have a little question.
Perfect.
Thank you. That's super kind. Hi. Thanks. This has actually been super inspiring. I guess, so the world of bakeries from a farmer seems a sort of quite a
Be blunt.
Yeah, it seems an impossible thing to reach in a way. So my father farms conventionally, and our wheat goes to God knows where.
Okay.
And I've just managed to wrestle a field off him, and I'm so
Amazing.
excited. And the deal is, if my field makes a little bit more profit than the rest of the farm, then the farm goes. And I'm kind of I'm tossing up ideas. I'm like, what am I going to do? And I'd love to grow some grain and for it to go somewhere.
Yeah. So you got to find your local baker.
Yeah.
And pitch this to them, agree on a price, and then go for it. And
it's literally that easy.
You're going to make...
Where are you based?
Where are you based?
Close to here.
We can link you up with... So there are several grain networks that are already set up across the UK. So we can link you up with local people in your network. Speak to us
There'll be a
afterwards.
WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Thank you. No, this is great. Hi. Yeah, that would, because it's it just kind of, there are bakers near me and their flour just seems normal. And but as you say, it's a two-way street. You can take the microphone off me.
It's interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. There seems to be a bit of a movement across the world of females taking over farms from their fathers, and it's happening in the wine industry too, which is really, really exciting. So go you. I think this gentleman in the green and then the lady at the back.
Hi there. It's just about accessibility. We
Yes.
talk about price, cost of living is obviously going up, and how do we make this nutritious loaf accessible and affordable to a large population that would otherwise not even think about spending that much on a loaf?
I'll jump in there first with a few statistics, and then maybe you guys can answer to it. So in the UK, you guys spend 11% of your income on food per year, and 1.6% on your health. And then lots on booze, loads on holidays, and loads on technology. And so, yeah.
Just on the 11%, if you look at the demographic, I think there is a certain demographic that are spending a lot more than that.
Yes, 11 is the average. So I'm allowing for, I think, for kind of the upper classes, it's anywhere up to 40%. And then it's a little less for people on less wages. So I think 11 is the average. But regardless of that, I think your question is amazing. So obviously, as a bakery, we've chosen to be accessible for a certain wage income. We also have a product that's €5, and then we also have loads of free education. So for us, our approach has been kind of twofold. One, we productize what we do, and two, we just offer a load of free education. And then we sell the flours and the grains so that people can access that. But I think probably in the UK, Henrietta and Wingmon, you guys can answer that question maybe a bit better than I can.
Yeah, I won't come at it with so many facts. I don't have the facts. As somebody who's been baking sourdough for 9 years, I'm well aware of the reputation that an artisan bakery has as only being for hipsters, only being for the middle class. I'm not middle class. I come from a working class family. I grew up eating shit white bread. And I still sometimes think there's a place for that, just to be brutally honest. But I do think there is a problem with accessibility, and it's a conversation that I think is unfinished. It's something that I still haven't reconciled as a baker. I think that in the bakery I'm currently working at, I work in Bath at the moment. It's a very affluent city. We encourage our customers who can afford to pay it forward and pay for a loaf for those who can't afford to pay. We work with a local organisation called Oasis Pantry in Bath, and they actually allow people to shop there, so it's not a free service, but the bread is much reduced there, but it's paid for by one of our customers who can afford it. So that's one way. But I don't necessarily think, we need better answers than that. We need more accessibility, and I agree with you. It's a problem.
I agree too. I think because we've only been running for a year now, it's constantly in the back of my head, and I think we sort of call ourselves an agroecological business, and one of the 10 principles of agroecology is food justice, and I feel very uncomfortable with that, basically, because I don't think our food is accessible to everybody, and that's something I'm definitely want to address in the future. I think right now I'm still not paying myself a wage. I think we need to get our business up and running, and then we will think about it. I'm thinking about things like, can we get some kind of funding project to reduce the loaves currently are £3.40 wholesale, and they're sold for about £4 to £4.50 retail. I think on another note, they keep for 7 days. I think there's a crazy... I'm not sure of the statistic, you might know it, Karen, but I think basically a massive amount of white sliced bread goes to waste. Whereas if we were to get this is basically value for money. And if we can get this to more people, hopefully less bread will go to waste. But yeah,
there's a way of refreshing sourdough. So like bread made in this way, you can refresh, you can put it under running water and rebake it. And then also so the shelf life of our products is 2 weeks. But I think to Henrietta's point, so I didn't pay myself for years. I pay myself an incredibly low wage to do what I do. And so I don't think the answer lies with the bakery industry and bakers. I think it's a much more socialist question, and it's we need to reevaluate how we pay all professions. My sister is a GP. She's on 250 grand a year. I'm on 10%, 5% of whatever she's on. And I'm probably doing more good for people than she is. People go to her, she prescribes some paracetamol and ibuprofen. I prescribe someone the Chia loaf, and it's changing their life. They're getting rid of the diverticulitis. They were about to have their bowel removed. Now their bowel has been saved. I'm not saying I'm a hero. I'm saying I'm an overworked baker that's trying really hard, as everyone is here. And I think it's a brilliant question, but I think it's one that we can't really answer without just...
Yeah. I do think similarly to what Landrace is doing. I think gradually, like I said, bakeries are sort of getting going, and then they are addressing this problem. For example, our friend Kimberly Bell, who we'll probably mention a lot, because she is leading the way basically in this movement. She has something called a population loaf because she uses the Waiku population in it, and she wants to get it to her local Nottingham population. So similarly to the pay it forward model, everybody who buys a loaf will add on a bit more, basically. Or I think she charges more. She charges sort of an extra 20p per loaf she sells in her bakery, and that will then go to 20p's will then go to one loaf that will sell in the local corner shop for £1, if that makes sense mathematically. So people are definitely thinking about it. But again, it's hard for small bakeries.
It's hard for small bakeries. Safia, on the point, you mentioned about supermarkets being an awful place to find food, nourishing food. So maybe to that point, I guess a lot of people are dependent on supermarkets for food. In your experience and through your work, do you see that changing? How do you see that ecosystem for the wider population changing?
Yeah, I think it is changing. For a certain demographic, though, that's the thing. I think a lot of us who are... it's a very privileged standpoint to be able to pick where you get your food from. So I think it's a long game, and I think, there are fundamental changes that need to happen in our food system. I guess I can't necessarily speak from a bakery business perspective, but I think there are other ways of, not necessarily through purchasing bread if that's not accessible to you, but at least getting people interacting with it and understanding it and starting to think about it. And I think slowly through, I know you do workshops and baking courses, and there's so many community bakery initiatives. I think pointing people in those directions and doing more of that is also a really good starting point. And then hopefully further down the line, then we'll have more change in the system, I guess.
Yeah. The lady at the back, you had a question.
Well, it's more kind of a comment and then see what your reaction is. So I persuaded my neighbour, an arable farm, very experienced arable farmer, to give up, like you, give up a 6-acre field to grow heritage wheat, and we worked with Fred Price and to get the grains, and that's all gone really well. But it's been really hard to found the bakers, but we've been really the stumbling block has been the milling. So we found a really great guy to mill, but it was just like him and his tiny mill, so there wasn't the output potentially, and there was the massive expense, so that was making it unaffordable for bakers to buy like 16 kg sacks. So we've kind of had to go through to find a sort of a small but more industrial scale mill, which doesn't quite feel right. So just, that's my experience.
Out of interest, how much were you going to have to charge per kilo to go with the small miller?
So he said he could do a 5 kg bag for £10.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's fine for retail. In fact, it's quite on the cheap side now. I got quite a lot of people, like friends and friends of friends, who are really keen on buying those. But we couldn't, it was quite a lot of handling, and we didn't have the sort of logistics or sort of manpower, woman power, to kind of make that all happen. To go entirely the retail route, and that's why we're looking for a baker to develop that relationship with. But as I say, the milling has always, just because there's such a lack of mills around, and particularly obviously you're looking for stone ground. It's no point growing this fantastic stuff and then getting it roller milled. So we've hit up against that, and this year we've got 11 tons, hopefully, going to be harvested, and we're scratching our heads. Ooh. Not that keen on just letting it all go to this small-scale industrial mill, but and we're in the Midlands, and we are connected with the Southwest Grain Network, but it's only because we haven't got our own grain network, and it's a little bit out of our geographical zone, actually.
Whereabouts in the Midlands?
So near Droitwich. Between Droitwich and Bromsgrove.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could try to connect you to Kim. She's in Nottingham.
Yeah, I know.
East Midlands.
It just seems as though there's definitely people who we feel could work with you. I know of a couple of mills in the Midlands, so if you wanted to come up at the end, we could try and connect you with Kim, and then hopefully we can find you a miller.
Yeah,
Emma.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
There's a question here, gentleman with the peaked cap. Also, you could consider selling flour just to home bakers for £4 a kilo. I would happily buy flour from you for £4 a kilo and make a precious loaf with your precious grain. Yeah. And we have that with one of our millers, Oak Forest Mill in Kilkenny. They spent a huge amount of time handling it, the admin. And I think it just depends what way you want to go. Do you want to go that route at the start and put the effort in? Or, it depends on what your capabilities are, I suppose. Let's go to the gentleman in the peak cap.
Hi, so we farm not far from here. We grow wakelands and are moving into heritage grains and ancient grains. And it's not the first time I've heard the sort of the missing link. I think it was talked quite a lot on Farmerama's 6-part series. There seems to be a sort of real lack of millers around.
Yes.
And so for us as a group of regen farmers locally, we're quite keen on the idea of, and as farmers, we can sort of storage out, because storage is quite a big deal when you're dealing with small amounts of stuff. We're geared up to have epic amounts of storage, bulk storage for commodity, but we can sort of deal with that. That's within our remit. And of course, great bakers out there, and connecting with bakers seems to be an okay, easy thing to do. but that is exactly the point, that the lack of millers. So is there any sort of I don't even know how it works. Is there a sort of milling school, or is there any sort of plan to improve the number of millers?
I think that's an excellent question. So, I think it is about encouraging apprenticeships in millers, and then I think in the UK you're very fortunate to have access to a lot more investment than we are in Ireland. But I think it's essentially encouraging people to apprentice in millers, and then have the investment ready to set these stone mills up around the country. I think a really interesting person to follow and who I'm hugely inspired by is Fintan Keenan. He's an Irish guy from Monaghan, based in Copenhagen, and he's building his own mills with his brother. They're fortunate to be the sons of a mechanic, and so they're just really good at building stuff. And so I think it's just surrounding yourself by people who enjoy building things and trying to do some apprenticeships.
There's also... Okay. A lot of, we've mentioned them before, but a lot of people in the UK have recently, and in sort of this grain network, have been buying new American stone mills. You could go. I don't know if you've ever thought about like a local, a sort of collected mill that you all take your grain to. And I know that I could mention sort of 5 people who'd be very happy for you to visit their mills, see how they work, and they're all really working for them, and they're also great because they mill British soft wheats very well in the whole grain form. So that might be something you could think about.
And it's not just bakers as well. There's quite a few farmers who've acquired mills on their farms who don't have bakeries. So if you felt more comfortable connecting with other farmers and having a conversation with them, we could connect you with those as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think farmers are quite good at sort of just cracking on and giving it a go, but you know, because it's just slightly out of a comfort zone of what we're used to. You know, it's interesting. You know, it'd be nice if there was some great workshops or milling workshops or ways of learning together about that.
There is a fantastic man in the UK grain world called Andy Forbes, and he is a fountain of knowledge on heritage grains, but he is also a very good miller, and he travels with his mill fairly frequently. So we can try and connect you to him, perhaps, for a conversation.
Maybe you can start in the workshops. You got to get the mill, and then it's like the milling workshop. It happens in September. We're all nice and relaxed.
I specialised in workshops of how not to do things. That's one way of learning, isn't it?
Thank you so much for your question. Chris, do you have a question?
It might be something just...
Hello.
It might be something that Nottingham Mill Co-op are thinking about. Yeah. Doing some apprenticeships as well.
Quickly to you, something some people do in New Zealand, like we're all like a really small country, and so we all kind of know each other. One of the groups of farmers bought a bakery, a mill, right? And that's where they send all of their stuff. And that mill, who is responsible, he's responsible for the flour for a couple of different bakeries, and he was the one that was happy to take that work on. And that actually worked out really well, and it's currently working. And I can send you to them because they're the most humble people in the world. They'll fucking tell you anything. They'll just be like, "This is how we did it, and this is how you can make it work." I do the same amount as you do myself in my bakery, and I can step you through that if you like, because we fit it in with 2 sessions of an hour and a half of milling a week, and that gets us to that quantity. And that's what we go through about a year. We go through about 10 to 12 tons of our wholemeal and rye that we mill ourselves, and then we put our white on top of that. So if you would like, I can tell you how we do that, because we do it. Cool. So that was my little spiel.
Thanks, Chris.
Anyways, questions. If you find these YQ and alternative grains as being embraced by bakers, how do you find the farmers' responses and interests in growing this in comparison, and what are your issues that you're facing?
Look, I mean, John, so we obviously use the YQ from Wakelands, and then we use some from John, and
And I suppose I ask that in a wider sense as well. Like, what do you think you guys as bakers, maybe that's a better way to put it, like, what do you think you as bakers are like coming up against is trying to convince farmers to grow in a way that, to grow things that you want to bake with?
I don't think it's the farmers who need convincing. I think it's the bakers who need convincing to change their ways and bake with better.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I agree with Henrietta. I think that for me as a baker, I don't necessarily want to tell a farmer what he should be growing unless he asks me directly or she asks me. Or, if they ask me directly, then I might have some favourite varieties that I want to be grown. But I'm happy to work with what the farmer chooses to grow. I think that's the excitement of it. But I do think that, there's a lot of bakeries now and a lot of people doing a lot of different kinds of bread, and not everyone has the same attitude. So a lot of it is about sort of flipping our perceptions as bakers. We sort of, social media has kind of brought about a certain style of bread that is sort of style over substance, let's say. Not to say, and I'm not saying that that's bad bread, but it's just different. And I think that we need to change our perceptions of, having this perfectly Instagrammable loaf. Like, is the loaf delicious? Is it nutritious? Like, these are things that we should be thinking about more than whether something looks good. And I think that a lot of the time when people are working in larger scale bakeries where they're used to oven spring and using roller milled flours and stronger flours, they go to use British grains and they don't get the result that they want because they're just looking for a certain look. It's nothing to do with the flavour or texture or anything. They're not looking for that. They want it to be aesthetically pleasing in the way that they feel that it is, and I think that's problematic. But there are a lot of people starting to use British grains, I think, and if we can influence them to even just use, like 15-20% in their bread, I think that's a great starting point.
You're so lucky that the farmers want to do that. We have almost the opposite problem, like at the other side of the world, where the farmers don't want to grow that stuff. And they just want 10 tons to the hectare or 15 tons to the hectare, and that's what they're interested in. So, like, you're really privileged, and that's, like, a really hopeful place. Like, even though you're a much bigger country, and you've got way more people, and that's a really, that's really complex, and I couldn't imagine what that's like. Like, that is really hopeful to know, like, that you can get there, and you're in that place. So, yeah, no, that's cool. Thank you.
Does anyone else? Gentleman there, yeah. So your question is, do we have experience with organic strains? Grains, yeah. So, I mean, we choose to only use organic or regenerative. I use the word regenerative as a way of just describing people that aren't organically certified. For me personally, because, we do everything very much based on science, and the science says that pesticides wreak havoc with your microflora. And obviously that's the problem we're trying to resolve. Then, we're pretty stringent on our ingredients, and so yeah. But I think, and I think also to this lady's point, we're very stringent on stone milled. So we wouldn't touch a roller milled flour, and that's it. And we don't actually on our product pages on the website and even in our marketing, we don't even really talk about organic much anymore, because we just assume that people assume that they're getting that because of obviously the price point, but because over the past 8 years we've built up so much trust with our community. Like, even when they come to visit us at Teach Skull and Mayo, they're like, oh, no, obviously it's organic, and we're like, obviously, yeah. And I kind of use organic really to describe. Obviously, it's made over 3 days. Obviously, it's good. Obviously, we're well-intentioned people, and we have your best intentions in mind when we make this. And so, yeah. And I guess you guys are the same.
Yeah. All of our... So Wakelands is Soil Association certified, and then I think John and Guy Turner are as well. So, yeah, all of our grains are organic, basically, and they bake really well.
I think that I think where organic actually came in really useful was many years ago, and to Safia's point, which I love today, just the overwhelming amount of knowledge that is flooded into our inboxes. I think we all have to pick a word or a sentence to use in marketing what we do, and so. So in 2014, this famous comedian in London had her bread, and she said, "My poo is like a model poo citizen. This is the magic poo bread." And so since then, our signature loaf is called the magic poo bread, and it has been incredibly effective. And we've had people of all ages and ranges come into Teach Skull and Mayo and ask for the magic poo bread with a little giggle and a little smile, and it's playful and it's wonderful. And so for me, maybe it's because I'm Irish, I don't know, but using comedy as a medium for change has been quite effective. And so I think it's really good to bring up language and the meanings of words into this discussion today, and how to use them in a powerful way for change. And so the word we use is poo. The word that, stimulates that, I guess, is magic. And people call us magicians, and that's all wonderful. And we just really are simple bakers who are all overworked and tired and dying for a swim in the sea. But actually, on that point, I think that's a really good question. So, Henrietta, if you were to use one word, and the same for you, Inman, to just what's the word that captivates your audience, and what's the word that can stimulate more people into your captive audience?
For me, it's connection.
Awesome. Amazing. Wing-Won?
I think for me, community.
Awesome. Safia?
Curiosity.
Amazing. Was that all C's?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Anyone else have any questions? Yeah, gentleman at the back. We're done. One last question, and then I think we're done.
So I'm involved more oriented in the cheese world, and I'm doing a little bit of work on the possibility of creating an apprenticeship for cheesemakers. So I was just curious about milling and whether you guys felt that might be something of interest to develop, in terms of that problem that you talked about earlier.
Definitely, 100%. I mean, the lack of millers has very much been on my mind for several years, and it's been highlighted by other farmers here as well. So if there was an apprenticeship, I think that would be amazing, because I think milling is a much more technical and different skill to baking. So, yeah.
Cool. Maybe we could talk in a minute then. Thanks.
Guys, I think that's us. I think we were finished 10 minutes ago and I didn't realise, so I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for coming. If you guys want to try any magic poo bread, please check out thehappytummyco.com. We're Happy Tummy Co on Instagram. Do you guys want to do a little...
Oh, we'll slice up some bread for people to try if you want to stay as well.
Thank you so much, guys. You've been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.